So when I was at school, I had a crazy, very hairy, very funny chemistry teacher called Mr. Mavramatis. And one lesson, he obviously was just bored, and he went over to one of us in the class and said, "Did you know that if you eat a whole cabbage, you will die?" And she went, no way, that can't be true. Before long, the whole class was involved in this debate, and he was insisting, it's true, if you eat a whole cabbage, you will die. And we were going, that can't be right, that can't be true. And eventually he said, look, I didn't say how soon you would die. If you eat a whole cabbage, you will die one day. If you don't eat a whole cabbage, you will die one day. Kids, everybody dies. And I was telling that story the other day, and it made me wonder, why is it that 15 years later, I remember that joke? And I wonder if it stuck with me because that's actually something that people don't often say out loud. Everybody dies. But it is this huge fact of human existence. We are all going to die. And so what do we make of that? Can we make sense of it and live in the light of it? Or do we just have to sort of shove it into a cupboard in the back corner of our minds, jam the door shut, try and ignore it until one day it comes bursting out at us? And I just want to start our conversation tonight by suggesting 3 reasons that I think actually it's not morbid or unhealthy to think about what happens when we die. I think arguably it's unhealthy not to think about it. The first reason I want to suggest is this: we are meaning-seeking creatures. Imagine you're writing a book, and you're writing out by hand what feels to you like a beautiful, meaningful story. And every time you finish a page, you put it down on the desk, you start writing the next page. But imagine that somebody comes over to you after every page and picks up that page you've just finished and throws it onto the fire. And you watch them do this again and again, and then you look down at the page you're writing. Would you be able to carry on? The thing is, if there is nothing stronger than death, then in the end, death is going to take every single page that we write in the story of our lives and burn it until there is nothing left. If we've just emerged by accident from an impersonal universe and we're going to vanish again without a trace, then ultimately, nothing we do matters. More than that, we don't matter. Professor Stephen Hawking famously once said, "The human race is just a chemical scum on a moderate-sized planet." But the thing is, we don't feel like chemical scum, do we? We don't live like our lives are just meaningless accidents. We feel like what we do matters, like who we are matters. We are meaning-seeking creatures. And the message of Jesus says this: what if this world is not going to be scrunched up and thrown away, and you aren't either? What if actually you don't have less dignity and significance than it feels like you do? You have more. What if what you do matters and who you are matters? Because there is a God who is never going to die and who will never forget you. What if there is a God of life who is stronger than death, who is going to heal and renew this world, raise his people from the dead, wipe every tear from their eyes, and give them life as it was meant to be lived with him forever? Do you see what a difference that would make? Whether or not there is a life that lasts is hugely important because it gives significance and meaning to the life we live now. The second thing is that we are justice-seeking creatures. I couldn't really do this talk without talking about this because it's been on my mind so much, and I'm sure it's been on everyone's mind so much as we've watched what's happening in Ukraine. We're heartbroken by it, we are angry about it, and we long for justice to be done, don't we? And on the news, when they've sometimes interviewed Ukrainian Christians, it's made me think, what difference does it really make to believe in Jesus in a time like this? Because I think everybody longs for justice. I don't think that's a Christian thing. I think that's just a human thing. But I wonder if the difference is, if you don't believe there's anything stronger than death, then in a situation like this, there is no real hope for proper justice. Because Putin is immensely powerful. He has nuclear weapons at his disposal. The reason this is happening is there is no human institution that has the power to stop him outright. And even if we get a peace agreement, no one is going to be able to hold him to account for what he's done, for the lives that he has wasted. And as I feel that kind of helplessness and frustration, Weirdly, something that's kept coming to mind is a quote from Voldemort in Harry Potter, where he says, "There is no good or evil, there is only power, and those too weak to seek it." And I think the question that all of us have to honestly face up to is this: do we actually believe that ultimately that is true? It seems like Richard Dawkins does. He says, the universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is at bottom no design, no purpose, no evil and no good, just blind, pitiless indifference. If death has the final word, then in the end, there is no good or evil, there will be no justice, there is only power. But the message of Jesus says that's not true. Let me just contrast to those two quotes an extract from one of the earliest public speeches about the message of Jesus. The Apostle Paul, talking to a group of philosophers in Athens, the conclusion of his speech was this. He said, "Now God commands all people everywhere to repent, for he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed. He has given proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead." Now, imagine again you're a Ukrainian Christian and you know this is true. Imagine the difference it makes to know that God has raised Jesus from the dead and he can raise us with him too. To know that God has promised he will judge the world with justice. So however much power somebody has, no human being can escape justice forever. No human being can escape justice forever. And who is going to be the judge? It's Jesus. And I find that immensely moving because, of course, the same Jesus who will judge the world with justice is the one who died on a cross. He is the ultimate victim. He was unjustly condemned. He was mocked and beaten, subjected to torture and humiliation, and then stripped naked and nailed to a cross to die in agony. He will judge the world with justice. So we can be sure that no victim of abuse or oppression will have their suffering forgotten or ignored or devalued. Because Jesus, the ultimate victim, has risen from the dead, we can be sure the justice that we long for will be done. But finally, the third reason we need to think about this now is that we are responsible creatures too. Because this idea of Jesus judging the world with justice is powerful, but it's also hard, isn't it? It's really hard because you might have noticed that Paul doesn't say there, "Now God commands all evil tyrants to repent." He says, "Now God commands all people everywhere to repent." What does he mean by that? He means that every single human being matters to God. And that God has given every single one of us the dignity of moral responsibility. And that requires a real response, not just from evil people, but from all people. And this is something I have, over the years, found really hard to get my head around. But let me just share something that's really helped me. Imagine you know someone who's been raised by loving parents. Their parents have been kind to them and generous. They've given them everything they've needed. And then when this person turns 18, they leave home and they cut off all ties to their parents. They refuse to respond to their calls. They will not contact them. They will not reciprocate their love at all. And they will not express any gratitude towards them. How would you feel about that? What if they were kind to their friends, they gave money to charity? Would that make it okay? So I think we all know instinctively there are some people to whom we owe, rightly, a debt of love and gratitude. And in those situations, doing nothing is not neutral. It's a real problem. Now, the point that Paul had been making in his talk up until this conclusion is this. He says, you may not know who God is yet, but you are already deeply related to him. And you rightfully owe him a lifetime of thanks. He says God has made the world and everything in it, including you. Every continued second of your existence is a gift from him. Everything good that is in you and everything good that is around you comes from his goodness and generosity and creativity. Even the very breath that you are taking right now is a gift personally from the God who knows you, who made you, and who loves you. And so rightfully, we should all thank him and love him back. And yet so often we don't. And this is a situation where doing nothing is not neutral. it's a real problem. Now, we might really reasonably say, how can I be responsible to a God when I don't know who he is? He hasn't shown me what he made me for, so surely the best I can do is live a good life in my own way, and that's just all he can really ask for. But Paul says that's just not the whole story anymore. He says, God now commands all people to repent, to turn to him, because he has given proof of this to everyone by raising Jesus from the dead. The resurrection is the ultimate demonstration, the great proof that Jesus really is the unique Son of God, that we can trust him. It was the evidence for the resurrection that convinced me to trust him 12 years ago. And the thing is, because God has revealed himself to us in Jesus, we are responsible for what we do with that. We are responsible for whether or not we ignore the God who has shown himself to us and actually who has loved us to death. Because here's the final thing. Again, the same Jesus who will judge the world with justice is the one who died on the cross. And he said he was doing that willingly out of love for us. You see, we were all made to love others and to love God, but none of us love others as much as we love ourselves, and all of us have shunned the God who gives us life. And yet, in Jesus, God comes to die the lonely death that deserves. Jesus says to us, if you will let me, I will take responsibility for all of your moral failure. I will take responsibility for all of your guilt and take onto my shoulders all of the condemnation that deserves for you instead of you, so that you can be fully and freely forgiven. I find that utterly breathtaking because it resolves this deep tension, right? Where every one of us longs for justice to be done in this world, but all of us shrink back from the idea of our own lives being truly judged. And yet, in the resurrection, God announces at the very same moment that Jesus will judge the world with justice and that he can offer us complete forgiveness. He announces in the very same moment that each one of us is responsible for how we respond to him, and that Jesus is willing to take responsibility for all of our moral failure and set us free from it. If it's true that Jesus rose from the dead, it is incredibly good news. It means we're not just a chemical scum. Our lives do have meaning. It means that the justice we long for will actually be done, and it means that the judge is alive and holding out to us complete forgiveness and resurrection life with him forever. So let me encourage you. I think that this is the most important, the most urgent, the healthiest question that any of us could be asking right now is that actually true? Did Jesus actually rise from the dead?